Great. Hi, everyone. Great to have everybody here. My name is Leah Shaham, and I'm the founder and director of the Vision Zero Network. We're thrilled to have so many people on the line today, and I know I'm really excited to learn more about this really important and emerging topic, something we've been interested in for quite a while. So thank you for joining today. And our topic, as you know, is mapping what matters, building safer transportation systems with pedestrian asset data. So thanks for joining us. I'm going to start just with a little bit of overview. First, we are recording this webinar, so it will be available on our website probably in about a week or so, but want to make sure folks know it is being recorded. Secondly, we'd love to hear your questions. You can type your questions anytime into the Q&A box. You don't need to wait till the end. Go ahead and type them in so that we can be looking along the way. And we'll do our best to get to all of those. First, a little background about Vision Zero Network. Perhaps you're new to our work. We're a nonprofit that really is out there supporting folks on the ground advancing Vision Zero. So you can look online, see more at visionzeronetwork.org, a lot of online resources about what works for Vision Zero, learning from others. We also host a lot of webinars just like this one. Most of those are online as recordings, so please check those out. We also host peer exchanges and support various policy initiatives, such as intelligent speed assistance at the state level. Check that out online. And we host or promote various events, which I'll share a bit more on. So just a few examples. Please check out, again, our materials online. These are all free and available to anyone who's interested. You can catch up on past topics via our past webinars, our blog posts. I'll highlight one resource we're particularly proud of called Fair Warnings. It's recommendations on using speed safety cameras in a very effective and equitable way. So that's all online and available. And I also want to announce or tout a bit that we are celebrating our 10-year anniversary at Vision Zero Network. Time flies when we're working hard. So we'd love to invite folks to join us in really reflecting on the progress that's been made, the change that you all on the ground have been making as we've really progressed the Vision Zero and safe systems movement, and also to be looking ahead. So we're really taking our 10-year anniversary as an opportunity to, again, reflect and then think ahead. What do we need to change most? What will be most meaningful to advance the goal of Vision Zero? So we'll share some links here that you can check out. We're doing a series of top 10 lists. Most recently is a kind of top 10 areas of progress nationally for Vision Zero in the last 10 years. Really proud of that. So check it out. And we've got a few other pieces there. So stay on the lookout. One other upcoming event, would ask folks to save the date. November 16th is Annual World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims in the US. This is a global event, and we've been seeing it really grow in the US. And it is a time, I would say, both to reflect and memorialize, remember those that have been killed or severely injured, hurt in crashes, and also a time to really organize at the local level. Last year, we had more than 70 events, big and small, across the country. So this is something where, maybe as a community member, a neighbor, somebody who's interested in school area safety or improving road safety in your own neighborhood, this is an opportunity to bring attention to the change that needs to be made. So please check out our website. We'll put the website in there of World Day of Remembrance. This is for this year, November 16th. There's still time to plan events. You'll see a ton of information on our website about what it is, and even a big toolkit of how you can organize an event, even if it's small, maybe it's 10 people. But we have a lot of tools and tips in there of how you can draw attention to issues of safety in your community. So we hope you'll check that out. And now I'm going to turn to introducing today's topic, again, mapping what matters, and really looking at, I think there's definitely growing awareness of the traffic safety crisis on our streets, particularly around the pedestrian safety crisis. What we find is that people are sometimes shocked, and let me share some of the data. You all probably know this on this call, that's why you're here. But it's pretty shocking to think about how much traffic crashes and deaths particularly, but people walking and pedestrian fatalities have increased in the last 10, 12 years. You see a statistic here, 75% increase since 2010 based on 2022 numbers. This is uh, just tragic, and it is preventable. So a lot of our work at Vision Zero Network, and probably a lot of you on the call, is helping people see that this trend does not have to continue. We must work to control it. And I think one of the things that we hear a lot from people is either, we don't know what to do, we don't know what tools to use, what strategies to use to improve pedestrian safety, or maybe we do know which strategies to use, but we're not sure where, right? We have so many streets or blocks or so many, miles in our community, but we don't know where to put our scarce resources. So I really want to laud the folks who are going to be sharing today. What they're really focused on, I would say, is helping communities understand, where kind of some essential elements using data, where are the most in need areas, where can they really invest best, most effectively for safe streets, most equitably. And I won't get into that too much because they're going to share that. But um, tiny, I guess we want to celebrate anything, but a small decrease of number of pedestrian deaths from 22 to 23. Um, Somewhat encouraging, but obviously these numbers are still tragically high. So again, what we're really thinking about today is how to use every kind of tool available, but to use technology, safety data, to really be more precise in how we're using the strategies and tools, and funding, obviously funding very much, and your staff time to focus on what matters most, particularly around pedestrian safety. So I'm very excited. What I'm going to do now is introduce our two panelists, and I'm going to introduce them both now. We're going to start with Asher. Asher Eskind is the principal planner in the state of Rhode Island. And I've been really impressed. Asher's and his team have really been using this approach of a deep dive into data and more precise safety planning, or planning for their work on pedestrian safety and active transportation in Rhode Island. So Asher's going to share his experience first. Then we'll hear from Bill Singleton with Ecopia AI. And Bill, I want to say thank you. Ecopia AI is a sponsor of Vision Zero Network, so thank you for your support. And I know we've been learning a lot from them over the past couple of years about what can be done, and they've been really building up their resources. So Asher's going to speak first. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and ask Asher to join here. Asher will come on, excuse me, come online and share his slides. And I'm really excited. So Asher will speak, then Bill, then we'll all come back and we'll have about 20 minutes of questions and answers. So feel free, please, while you're listening, feel free to go ahead and type questions into the Q&A box. You don't need to wait till the end. We'll definitely come to Q&A with Asher and Bill. So great. Asher, thank you. Welcome, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Leah. Appreciate the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming here this afternoon. So my name is Asher, and I am a principal planner with the Rhode Island Division of Statewide Planning. We are the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Providence region and the sole MPO for the state of Rhode Island. I'm excited to be here today to talk about one of our ongoing projects called the Rhode Island Walk Inventory. It's a project to create a geographic database for pedestrian infrastructure. So think like sidewalks, crosswalks, curb ramps, and other transportation-related features of the built environment. For those of you familiar with GIS, it's essentially a bunch of shapefiles. So before jumping in, I want to pose some examples of questions that we're seeking to answer with the Rhode Island Walk Inventory, or perhaps better answer. Questions such as how many miles of sidewalks do we have in Rhode Island? Are there any transit stops that lack a safe and accessible pedestrian connection? Where should some new sidewalks or crosswalks be added? These questions are currently quite difficult to answer without accurate and up-to-date statewide data about our pedestrian network. So here's a quick glimpse of what I'll talk about today. Since the walk inventory is a data project, a great place to start is by looking at our current data assets and what is missing. Apologies. So Rhode Island has a lot of data, including aerial imagery, roadway data, building data. Here's our aerial imagery, roadway, building, and a host of other land use and land cover data. I believe that this one right here is parking. Of course, have a lot more data, but these three layers illustrates the current data assets of Rhode Island. This map is comprehensive specifically for vehicular transportation, but it doesn't quite capture the multimodal travel patterns that take place on our streets. Features like sidewalks and crosswalks and even urban vegetation like street trees and others like stormwater that we don't quite have yet. They paint a much more accurate picture of the streetscape for all users. Just by adding these three data layers, so much more of the map is covered and accounted for in this database. So, where can we get this data from? We began very simply with a Google search of keywords, things like transportation data and feature extraction, starting just very basically. From there, we found a handful of potential vendors and reviewed their extraction methods. We also found lists of features available for extraction. And then we researched project portfolio. So when I say extraction methods, I mean what kinds of uh, data they use as inputs. So things like aerial imagery or LiDAR, if they use AI, or if they drive around your region and take images and extract data using that. And available features, things like sidewalks, crosswalks, or if they have other possible transportation features, roadway widths, or stormwater features, a whole host of different infrastructure that's out there. And then for the project portfolios, what kinds of projects have they worked on? Have they been working with mainly private sector or public sector? Do they extract things more like land cover, or is it transportation based? That's what we were interested in looking at. We also requested product demos. So the vendors showed us similar projects that they've worked on to what we are hoping to get with the Rhode Island Walk inventory. And then they also provided Rhode Island specific cost and timeline estimates. So months of research led us to one feasible vendor by the name of Ecopia. And Ecopia uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to extract transportation features from aerial imagery. And because of this, they could offer a much quicker and much cheaper deliverable than the other vendors could to Rhode Island. And we're talking weeks versus months and tens of thousands of dollars versus hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's pretty significant. They've also worked extensively with public sector agencies at all levels and have worked on a number of projects just like the walk inventory for other MPOs. And mind you, this is according to our research. This is just what we found. If you do similar research, you might find something else, but this was the most feasible vendor for Rhode Island. So here's an example of what they're able to do. This is an aerial image taken of the University of Arizona, I believe, in Tucson. And for illustration purposes, here's what Ecopia can do with the aerial imagery. With their models, they can convert all the buildings that you saw in the aerial image to these pink shapes, and the dark green data layers were tree canopy, the teal roads. So they're able to just take the entire image of an aerial shot and convert it to data layers, which is pretty cool. Um, and just because Ecopia is able to deliver data in a matter of weeks does not necessarily mean that we at the state were ready for it. The internal approval process took a little longer than anticipated. It really ramped up, no pun intended, last summer. And we are expecting to have data by December, so about 6 months. It is now 15 months later, and we're still finalizing our path forward. We've had some holdups with our purchasing and IT departments. They wanted to ensure that we were compliant with the data acquisition plan that's set up for the state. Um, but new opportunities are constantly arising, so we remain pretty hopeful that we'll be getting the data soon. That being said, I definitely recommend checking with your IT departments regarding their AI policy if this is a project that you want to embark on, and get that out of the way. So before getting to some examples, using a sample of the Rhode Island data that Ecopia graciously shared with us, I want to talk about a survey that we sent out to our municipal partners. We asked our municipalities and our state agencies about their current data needs to append any features to the statewide plannings, sidewalks, and crosswalks. So we knew what we wanted, but we weren't entirely sure what our DOT and our Department of Health, our quasi-public agencies, and of course all the cities and towns in Rhode Island wanted. And they would all benefit from this walk inventory. And they revealed a strong desire for pedestrian infrastructure, which was very reassuring, as well as some other features that I would have never thought of, like stormwater, um, like fire hydrants and manholes were very highly recommended. And Bill actually brought up that this is people often don't think of stormwater features being directly connected to transportation features, but fire hydrants and storm drains are part of sidewalks, and they're connected to each other. And opportunities for transportation funding could also extend to collecting data like stormwater in a way that most people wouldn't necessarily think about. So I definitely recommend consulting with your partner agencies to learn about their data needs that may be completely different from yours and really take advantage of the economies of scope that comes with a project like this. So, circling back to the original question posed, we sought to answer them with the data. So we don't have statewide data quite yet, but um, Ecopia was gracious enough to loan us some preliminary data for the purposes of putting this presentation together. We're very appreciative of that. So we are able to answer or ask that question about Providence. So how many miles of sidewalks do we have in Rhode Island? Well, in Providence, we have about 430 miles of sidewalks. So using the data that we got from the sample, we were able to answer this question. This was a question that was rather difficult to answer before. And 430 miles sounds like a lot. However, when you compare it to the miles of roads, it's actually less. And the sidewalks only account for one side of the road. So in an ideal world for pedestrian safety and accessibility, where each side of the road has a sidewalk, we should be looking at that number being closer to 900 miles of sidewalks instead of 430. So kind of using this data, we're able to see the general picture of pedestrian infrastructure gaps in Providence alone. And Providence is one of the most urbanized parts of Rhode Island. What about any transit stops that lack a safe and accessible pedestrian connection? I was able to select bus stops that lie beyond 100 feet of a sidewalk, which are the lines in red. And these two bus stops are just examples. There are a bunch of others like them um, that are great candidates for sidewalk extension. So they lie just beyond 100 feet. And that's an arbitrary number, but that's something I was able to pick and run in ArcGIS Pro using this data. I wouldn't be able to do that otherwise. Um, so this would be a great place to maybe put some sidewalks, even a crosswalk, because there's bus stops on either side. And there's, again, a bunch like them. What about any transits? Oh, sorry. And finally, where should new sidewalks or crosswalks be added? I found this to be quite interesting. So we looked at some of our projects in our state transportation improvement program that actually just got approved about a month ago. So that's exciting. But these are roadways in East Providence, one of our municipalities, that have sidewalks and have pedestrian features, but they don't necessarily have crosswalks in all the places that would perhaps suggest a prioritization of pedestrian safety, is all I'll say. So here is it's a half-mile stretch of roadway that has no crosswalk. Um, and it's a STIP project, so this would be another great candidate for adding crosswalks. There's another stretch of roadway, Pawtucket Ave in East Providence, that is also another half-mile stretch situated between two residential areas that has no crosswalks. So anybody living in that area would have to walk at least um, half a mile down and back up to get wherever they're going, or cross a 4-lane highway. And then lastly, Veterans Memorial Parkway in East Providence is a very interesting road because it has a lot of really good pedestrian and just general active transportation assets. It's right along the East Bay Bike Path. There's also 3 elementary schools nearby, so it's a highly trafficked area, um, great for recreation. However, there is a 2.5 mile stretch without a single crosswalk. So any parent who's wanting to pick up their kid from the elementary school and is biking along the East Bay bike path and wants to cut over, it's not necessarily a safe option for them. If you're uh, just getting out of school, if you're a student getting out of one of these schools and want to go to one of the parks that's along the waterfront, I looked up the pedestrian network, the pedestrian route recommendation in Google, and it's kind of a crazy route. It has you crossing at a dangerous turn. There's no crosswalk. This is a perfect example of a place that could um, really use some pedestrian infrastructure improvements. And all of these maps would not be possible to make without having a comprehensive pedestrian data network. So this is just a few examples of how this data can be used. This is how I've used it in the past few weeks of having this data. So of course, active transportation implications for this data, wayfinding, infrastructure maintenance. It's a great way to house any information or updates about a sidewalk that needs repair, or a sidewalk that has already been repaired. That individual geographic feature, um, any updates can be stored there. Safety and accessibility, I think, goes without saying, as well as land use and zoning, as well as emergency response. Having another example of highly accurate geographic data is extremely helpful when wanting to know about ingress and egress points or where the road begins and where it ends. Something I didn't mention before is that a lot of these features come with widths as well. So it's not necessarily just a center line, if that means anything to you, if you have a GIS background. But that is all I have for you all today. And I'm going to pass it over to Bill. And here are my contacts. So please feel free to reach out with any questions. I'd be happy to explain any of the processes a little bit more. I appreciate your time today.
Great. Asher, thank you so much. I just want to chime in and say thank you for sharing. You're doing awesome work in Rhode Island, and we want to stay in touch and see where, yeah, see how it all develops. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Bill,
Thank you very much, Asher. Can everybody hear me?
sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Leah. First of all, I want to thank everybody from the Vision Zero Network for taking some time this afternoon to learn a little bit more about how Rhode Island has been using the data that we've been creating. Really excited to have this opportunity. We're already seeing some great questions come in, and I think I'll address some of those in my short bit of the presentation here, but really want to keep our time focused on the actual application of how this data is being used across the country. And then also focus on some of the federal funding opportunities that are inherent when you do have some of these data sets. So really looking forward to covering all of those. Just as a quick overview of our organization, for the last 13 years, we have been using the latest in deep learning to extract highly precise base map data from the latest remote sensing data, or latest remote sensing imagery, whether that's from everything from satellite, aerial to street view. So really excited to talk a little bit about today about what we're building as an organization. I think the 3 things that we sort of want to talk about today is I'm going to provide a couple of additional examples of some of the work that we're doing, not just at the MPO level across the country, but also with state DOTs and some of those examples. And then also other outside of the federal funding opportunities, I really just want to let you all know that all of this data is going to be built. So we have the top 400 cities already done, and I'm looking forward. I've already taken a look at some of the people who are attending today. I'm going to show you a couple of those cities so you can see that it's already done. This isn't sort of a, hey, we'll build it for you. Our intention is to have the entire country, well, I should say the lower 48. It's about 3.12 million square miles. Will be done from the latest aerial imagery by December 31st. So right now we have the top 400 cities done, but we're racing quickly to have all rural communities also complete. And I'll touch on some of the ways that not just the local communities, but also state DOTs, and even how the federal government has used some of our data in the past. So looking forward to giving you a little bit of a background there. Just as a quick high level of our organization, we initially got our start focusing on using satellite imagery to extract some basic features that were typically manually digitized, things like building footprints and basic road networks. We've had the opportunity to work in over 100 countries across the globe, and that's actually helped our models to be very well adapted to work in all different kinds of terrain across the United States, whether it's working on the West Coast in states like Seattle and Oregon, right through mountainous areas like Colorado, Nevada, all across to the East Coast. But what we recognized was if we started to use higher resolution aerial data, then the portfolio of features that we could identify accurately expanded greatly. And that's where we've spent the last 5 or 6, or I should say 6 or 7 years, is really focused on supporting MPOs, municipalities, state level governments, AEC firms, telecommunications organizations, to identify things like all of the impervious surfaces and everything in the transportation right away. So excited to show you some of these data sets. This is a quick list of some of the organizations that we're working with. Had the opportunity to work with Stantec on the Illinois DOT project. They're using our data from our Illinois DOT project, which I'll discuss here in a few minutes. Worked with parametrics to extract a number of pedestrian features, bike lanes, bike attribution as well. I think that was one of the questions that came in. We'll talk about that. Sidewalk width as well. That was another one of the questions that came in. So working with parametrics across for the Oregon DOT. But there's a number of examples of our team working either directly with municipalities with the data that we've created, or helping them to create a specific kind of data if they have their own requirements, or working with AEC firms who might be supporting ADA transition plans, active transportation, long-range transportation plans, whatever that might be. Just as a quick, I'm not going to spend too long on our process. I really do want to focus on the data set, but our team is pre-building all of the national data using Nearmap, Hexagon, EagleView, Vexel imagery. So we already have long-term partnerships with all of the major aerial providers. So if you do have access to any of their imagery, we're very tight partners with all of them. All of our vector data will match what they've created. But that doesn't mean that we have to use some of those options. Asher's a great example. If you have made your own imagery investment, Rhode Island had their own imagery set. We're more than happy to rebuild any data sets with imagery that you might have already invested in. So really flexible. Our system is quite agnostic to using many different kinds of source 3-band and 4-band imagery. Just lastly, anybody who says that they're just throwing automation at being able to detect very precise, highly accurate data from remote sensing data, that should be an immediate red flag. I think a lot of us have had some experience using some of the other widgets that are out there. There's a lot of parameters you have to set. You have to collect a lot of training data. We always triple check our results so that we can guarantee that we have a 95% minimum average accuracy. We've been assessed by the federal government at being closer to 97.5% here in North America. And so we're always consistently retraining our models and collecting more training data whenever we find ambiguous or edge cases, so that we can provide data that's ready to go for the clients that we're working with. And that's really what we're trying to build out, is data sets that are 95% and above accurate. Really, one of the key things that we're seeing from some of our larger customers is having standardized data. Open data is great, but it can be created by thousands of different contributors from 100 different data sources. And so having a data set that is normalized across an entire region makes analysis a little bit more robust. And we are not a software solution. We are just creating data that you guys can use however you'd like in the applications that you're used to using today. So whether it's for computer-aided design, for permitting, traffic control, using Bentley or Autodesk, or most of the Esri applications that Asher just mentioned, we are creating data sets in whatever file format makes the most sense for you and delivering it to you so that you can get started right away or help to apply for federal funding or whatever that might be. So I'm going to quickly touch on 2 use cases. The first one is in support of the Baltimore Regional Transportation Board. organizations like Tool Design have leveraged this data in some of the further analysis that they've done. But just to give you a sense, this is just looking at 2 of the 70 odd assets that we're identifying across the U.S. This was the data set that the organization was using before. It was a sort of a mix of an open data set versus what was built internally from some college interns. And you see here, many of the major corridors are covered. This is for sidewalks and crosswalks versus what we were able to build out for Baltimore when we had the opportunity to work with them. So it was a 10 times increase in the amount of polylines or geometry that we were identifying across the entire MPO. But we can also go one step further. So we always attribute yes, there's attribution in terms of extraction date, image date, all those other pieces, but we can add things like different classifications and width measurements. And so this can really help you with ADA transition plans and starting to get a better idea of where you might have issues or you want to submit planning proposals for things like Safe Streets for All. So you might want to get a better idea of what areas might have more issues in terms of safe and equitable transportation routes. The next case I'm going to talk about, we're actually doing our 3rd update working with the Illinois Department of Transportation. For that project, we've been extracting 26 features, 26 assets across the 16 MPOs of the state. It's about 5,000 square miles, and we've been keeping that up to date every 2 years. And so this is in this initiative, extracting not just transportation features, but also some of those land cover features that you were mentioning, that Asher mentioned, things like tree canopy and other sort of natural and human features. And so you can see this is a similar assessment to what we did with Baltimore. But just to give you sort of a sense of some of the features that have been identified, really identifying a full sort of suite of GIS assets so that organizations can get started right away, whether it is working for a transportation federal funding grant, whether it's working on an active transportation plan, a long-range transportation plan. But as Asher mentioned, the same data, not enough times people are pulling from other buckets. If you're collecting all of the impervious surfaces, then you are, which can be helpful for stormwater utility fees and some of the floodplain management federal funding programs. Those also support each other. So that's another way that you could potentially work with other departments in order to get access to data so that both of your applications or both of your requirements can be met. So I'm just going to quickly pop out of this I just wanted to show just a quick example of all the data that's being built across the country. And so this is an area, Milwaukee. I picked a couple of cities here, but what you can see here, and I'll play with the opacity a little bit, but even when you do have situations with occlusion and tree canopy, our system is able to combat that. And so you know that you have the confidence that you have a complete data set across the country. And so as I mentioned, we have the top 400 cities already done from 2025 aerial imagery. And so whether you're an AEC firm or you're a city, you can come and whether it's 1 or 2 features, like let's say we just want to work with sidewalks to get started, sidewalks and crosswalks, because we don't have that information. We can provide you just those pieces to get started. But there's a number of other features that we're also collecting across the entire region. So would love to be able to help if anybody has any requirements in sort of the list of top 400 cities, and happy to provide additional information on that. The one thing I'm very excited about as well, and this is the last thing I'll show you before I jump into a quick summary of the federal funding opportunities, is we're also starting to get into much more detailed asset identification. So identifying all of the different kinds of center lines for all the different kinds of lanes. So you can, I'll play with that right here. So you can get a sense of whether it's for traffic safety or traffic planning. You can have center lines and lane counts for the entire country, and we're just about to release this for the top 400 cities, and it will be included in our full country release later this year. But also getting down to all of the road markings as well, and this has been helpful for permitting, traffic control plans, and also public works. So even getting down to identifying things like the iconography of all of these individual features, stop lines, and a number of other things. So we've already decided to go out and build all of this. Really, the main piece that I wanted to leave everyone with today is there's really no need to recreate the wheel. This is being provided to a number of different verticals, like insurance, telecommunications, etc. And so just want to make sure everyone's aware of it, and if it can help with any of your efforts. So I'm going to pop over last thing. I've included this in the presentation, and we can provide some additional links. These are some of the programs that people have been using our data sets for in order to apply for additional funding for federal programs. It's almost criminal how underutilized the Safe Streets for All program is. It's same with the SMART program. Really, there's 2 stages for each of those programs. And especially when it comes to SS4A, the planning and demonstration piece, which is stage 1, so that you just need to be able to create a plan. And so this data is really helpful for that on what you want to improve. And it's a very low bar to get access to there. And so provided some additional links to all of these in the next slide here, so so that you can have them if you want to do any further research. In terms of some of the other buckets, though, I do like to also highlight this, and I want to be mindful of time. But working with the PROTECT program, the Promoting Resilient Operations for a Transformative, it's a bit of a mouthful, transformative, efficient, and cost-saving transportation, and the Healthy Streets program, and even some of the stormwater programs, by collecting some of these impervious surface data, tree canopy data, some of the natural data, it helps with asset resilience. It helps with heat islands and environmental requirements. And so it's just something to talk about. What we've seen some of the larger cities be most successful with, like CMAP, who helped coordinate our work with Illinois DOT, is being able to talk to a number of different user groups, because the same data can help enable a number of different requirements. And so that's the one thing I also like to stress is it's great to try to get a few different potential, I would say, user groups together, so that you can help coordinate and all use the same data, because we allow for data sharing amongst the municipal entities. But yeah, I wanted to, that's really what I wanted to address today. I'll just quickly go to the final slide here. Thank you very much for your time today. I'm really looking forward to your questions. And if there's anything that we need to take offline, please let me know. But thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Bill. That was a lot. And let me just say, I feel like we've got a record number of questions coming in. There's a ton of interest. We're going to get to as many as we can, but let me go ahead and ask, Bill, I'm hoping you can work with us and Asher some of these that we can follow up. We're not going to get to all these questions on the call now, but we've got you folks' contact information, so we will follow up separately. But let me just start with maybe some of the more specific ones. Bill, someone's asking, do you include pedestrian ramps in the data? And also, what about conditions of sidewalks and crosswalks?
So we always want to be very transparent with our clients. A lot of people have used our work with widths, and we can also identify the truncated dome, the safety pads on ramps. So that's something that we also address. I've seen some requirements for sidewalk, for sidewalk quality and pavement quality that are sort of 10 classifications, alligator cracks, and a number of different pieces. And that's really just not possible using aerial imagery, even if you're using 3-inch resolution. But what we've seen is a lot of people will use merging our data set taken from aerial to help highlight areas where there might be issues. And so do you really need to go out and create LiDAR or Street View survey data across the entire area or the entire MPO or the entire state? Or really, do you need to focus on maybe this 20%? And so that's where we've been more helpful, is helping with tipping and queuing, and then also helping with the gap analysis of sidewalks. But we always want to be really clear what can or can't be done from aerial data.
No, I appreciate that. That's great. Thank you. And then Asher, I'd love to ask, what are some of the ways, I know you're you're early in the work, but making progress. What are some of the ways that you anticipate, possibly working differently thanks to the information and this greater access to data? What are you foreseeing in terms of the benefits?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so as I mentioned in the presentation, so far, we've only had the data for about a month now, but I've been able to generate maps that I would not be able to generate without this data. So that's really cool because you speak about pedestrian access and pedestrian safety and just the general pedestrian network, but having the ability to provide graphics that back up what you're saying is so important. So that in and of itself has been such an asset. And also it changes the way that we can talk about these things. Um, and once we have the data and get it in the hands of our partner agencies at the state level and the municipal level, they'll be able to run spatial analyses with it too, as well as make maps similar to the maps that I've made. But I think that piece of it will be really big, being able to compare uh, the distribution of pedestrian infrastructure to public health outcomes and urban heat island and all sorts of things that we can with the data that we have at Rhode Island currently, we're able to run all sorts of spatial analyses on our roadway data, but can't do that with pedestrian data. So that's what I foresee as being a really powerful change with this walk inventory.
That's great. I might just follow up on that real quickly. I appreciated how much you emphasized the potential to partner and collaborate with other agencies and really to emphasize shared goals, right? I guess, yeah. Did you see a strong response from some of those other agencies? I don't know whether it was public health or emergency services or yeah, what was some of the response you got from folks beyond transportation specific that might spark ideas for people?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So we received responses from 22 of our 39 municipalities, so over half. If I'm doing my math right. I believe that's over half. And in a number of we got a lot of responses from our DOT, Department of Health as well. Um, Lots of responses from like landscape architects and GIS professionals, Public Works Department. So it was way beyond just planning. And I'd say at the municipal level, they were very interested in stormwater infrastructure. That was one of the most highly requested features for municipalities. We got 37 total responses, so a good amount over the course of like a month. And at the DOT level, they were very interested in vegetation, urban vegetation. I have all the data from the survey. I'd be happy to share that with anybody and also share the survey itself if they want to recreate something similar.
Wow, that's really generous. Thank you, Asher. Everybody, listen to that. Take Asher up on that. Appreciate that. Bill, I'd love to hear where are you seeing in the US? I know you guys work worldwide. In the US, kind of what level are you seeing the most interest or applicability? I guess I'm thinking, municipalities, county slash MPO, state level, federal. Where does this kind of work best? At what level?
So I would say just in terms of where we got our start, it was because again, we initially got our start working with satellite imagery. And so the most scalable was our work with supporting NOAA's Coastal Change Management Program. And so that's where we were extracting land cover data to support coastal changes fairly consistently over 1.5 million square miles of all of the coastal regions, and which sort of led to us being a little bit more what's the word I'm looking for? Having more initiative to build out the whole country. Because we've been working with them for many years now. But after that piece, where we've really seen things take off is at the municipal level, supporting MPOs, transition plans, traffic control plans, and that's where we've started to work more with the AEC side, with AEC clients, who tend to support a lot of these long range transportation plans, ADA transition plans. And so we've seen it be at sort of, it started at a federal level, and we've seen a lot more work now at the MPO level. And what ends up typically happening is, because we've worked now with over 40 MPOs, and most of the largest ones, but you start to work with a few MPOs in a state, and then you start to work with the state DOT. So that's again, we just want to make sure people are aware that it's available, and that it's ready to be pulled down if you need.
And you mentioned having, I think, the 400 kind of top areas. Is that in terms of population size? Is that the biggest?
Yes, yes, and we're really pushing to have the full country done, because you can imagine the highest density of features are all in the top 400 populated areas. But once we have those, because we're doing the advanced transportation features now, we have all the land cover done, but we should have all of that done by December 31st.
That's great. Awesome. Yeah, I've got a couple more questions. I know tons coming in here. You talked a little bit about, just make sure folks know, can you maybe share a little bit about sorry, Bill, question for you, delineating between kind of road types, paved, paved or unpaved, trail surfaces or roadway surfaces. Also, someone has asked a little bit about bike lanes, protected versus unprotected. Maybe describe a little bit of the nuance there that might be important to people.
Yeah, so we have four classifications of bike lanes. There's a protected, so medium protected, painted, sharrowed, some include shoulders as well as bike lanes, depending on where you are in the country. So we do have different classifications for the different bike lanes. In terms of the surface type, we typically stop at paved or unpaved, which can still be helpful. We've seen, because there's different requirements for Meyer elements, so extracting the model inventory. If it's a paved or unpaved road. So we will have a complete sort of countrywide paved or unpaved road data set, which is some additional, because a lot of people tend to have roads, but that's something that some additional attribution we can help with.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, super. Yeah, I want to ask, yeah, what would you say? Maybe Bill, I'll stick with you on this one for a second. What are you seeing as the most common challenges or needs people are coming to you with? What is the challenge they're trying to get help with? And then, yeah, maybe I'll just start with that.
The biggest, the sort of the lowest hanging fruit I've seen with a lot of individuals or a lot of organizations is the sidewalk pedestrian data. Really helpful to be able to do gap analysis. There's a lot of other information data sets, like Asher mentioned, having bus routes. So you have a complete data set of these specific like mass transit pieces, but not really an understanding of how they're connected, whether from their crosswalks or sidewalk perspective. And then also having the width of sidewalks. I'd say that's been, especially in the transportation field, the number one piece. But just to sort of expand on that piece is also the impervious surfaces, which lead to also resiliency of a lot of these pieces. If you're doing a flood, or how certain of these transportation assets can be impacted. A lot of people are looking for the impervious surfaces because it can help with other revenue generating. A lot of communities are starting to implement stormwater utility fees. And they also are doing flood analysis on those pieces. And so I'd say those are the two biggest pieces. Now that we're releasing our centerline data, of laneway centerline data, that's going a lot more into some of the traffic studies that are out there. And that was helpful for the work we did with parametrics and the Oregon Department of Transportation.
That's great. Thank you. One of you guys mentioned, particularly around, I'm maybe reading a little bit, ADA needs and requirements as well. I'm assuming, yeah, maybe speak to that a little bit. Is that something that's people are explicitly thinking about with the data and using the service? Or is that kind of maybe other agencies are coming in and saying, hey, as long as you're looking at this, also look at that. How should people think about ADA needs in this
Yeah,
work?
so ADA is a growing concern, especially the legal implications there. I do know that there's a number of communities that are in active legal disputes because they didn't have a really good understanding there. So it's a little bit of a risk piece. But one of the interesting things I've seen, and this is some of the work we've done with the AEC industry, I've seen some communities release RFPs for an ADA transition plan, and they misrepresent the amount of sidewalks that they have by a factor of two. And so you have these situations where AEC firms want to help with ADA transition plans, and when you start to dive into it, you look at open street data, which is inevitably not necessarily complete. You have situations where the community just didn't know of how much that they had or were responsible for, and so that's something that we definitely want to help with. By having this data set is like let's try to get an understanding of what we have and what the issues are, and then we can start to sort of deal with how we can improve that in the future.
Great, thank you. And Asher, maybe I'm seeing a question come in that thank you. You responded to one of the questions, but I want to bring it up to the group because I think it's a great one. Someone asked, is your team planning on updating Ecopia's data in-house or have them do it over time? Can you talk a little bit maybe about how you work together, how you plan to keep things updated, maybe thinking a lot about staff capacity, et cetera. There might be smaller communities on this call, for instance.
Yeah, yeah. So in terms of our data team, they don't quite have the capacity to update it in-house. We don't have a formal plan to update it. It's something that we're exploring if funds present themselves. But I know that Ecopia has they're able to provide like a Delta file with an annual change. So once they give you the data deliverable after a year, if you have new aerial imagery, you can submit it, and they're able to uh, provide not just a new data file, but also see what has changed between the first year and the second year. But no formal plans at Rhode Island to do that right now.
Great. And maybe speak to, if you would, a little bit, well, let me pause it. You talked a little bit about the reality of things taking sometimes longer than we wish, process-wise, especially, let's be honest, in government bureaucracies, right? It's not a surprise. But maybe thinking about that or other issues, are there any things you kind of wish you'd known a little bit more about or maybe done differently? Because I would say, Rhode Island is definitely a leader, trendsetter in this area. What advice might you have on maybe some of the more practical or setting expectations side of things for this type of work?
Yeah, yeah. My answer to the question is exactly that. Is just if I could go back and start at the beginning, I would get a much better understanding of what embarking on a data acquisition project looks like within my specific agency. I actually started this project as soon as I started working, so it was a lot of new things for me. But or when I started this position, but that would be a major thing is just getting a more complete understanding of what it really entails, how to conduct research, how to like what kinds of considerations I would need to think about. I mentioned it briefly in the presentation, but Ecopia does use AI, and um, even just the concept of using AI can be a somewhat alarming thing for an IT department. Whether or not it's uh, ag- against or in line with what their data plan is. It's just something that needs to be um, maybe hashed out a little bit more. So I would say just getting a full understanding of what is to come, looking at other examples of data projects. Um, that would be the major thing that I would do differently. And it's agency by to agency, a different is different between agencies.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is a really basic, this is going to be my last question, and then I'll kind of wind down here. But sometimes it does maybe surprise me, though it doesn't surprise me. I guess I'm reminded the basic concept of having these gaps of understanding what's in a city's inventory. Literally, how many miles, blocks of sidewalk does it have? Or I guess as somebody outside a government system, I sometimes think, well, that's wow, how can they not know that? I guess maybe just I should have asked this question at the beginning, but kind of going back, Bill, I'll start with you. Maybe help me just understand, why would you say there is such a gap of in this inventory? Where did that kind of come from? And is it that common? And I guess I'm just trying to set the stage here of why this is needed to start with.
Yeah, well, I think the number one thing that's inherent is like it's just very difficult to keep up, right? There's certain things that I mean, people have programs where they're collecting new aerial because the problem starts even before the digitizing is like, do you have up to date aerial imagery of your region? And so some people update that every year, some people it's every 3 years, and then what we typically see is especially if you're manually digitizing with potentially junior engineers or younger staff at the MPO is you receive this new imagery. It takes 6 months to fly the imagery, then it takes you 8 months to digitize it. We've seen, especially larger cities, it can take up to a year, and now all of a sudden you're working with a data set that's already 18 months old. And so there's certain things that like you really do prioritize needs to be identified. And I think before IIJA, a lot of the things that were most important were things like building footprints because it has tax assessment um, sort of implications. And so I think a lot of people were more focused on certain aspects of making sure that these data sets were complete. And so I think IIJA has been great with for that. So is like now there's a commitment and a focus and funding opportunities to create not just like complete plans, but also just for the planning phase. It's like, listen, we want to get a handle on what's going on. And so I think over the last couple of years, there's been a little bit more focus there. And so, and also having the availability to use some of these automation tools really makes it a lot easier for us to keep everything up to date. So I think those are the main issues.
Yeah, great point. Great point. And I want to really emphasize before I get to the final, emphasize the funding. Bill, I appreciate that you've mentioned this several times. I'm guessing a lot of folks are aware of SS Fray. That is still a running program. I'm knocking on wood right now. There's another, is it year or two left? We'll see when the dates come out for that. But that planning funding, the planning pot is really undersubscribed. I want to emphasize that. So for communities on this call, this could be part of your package. Maybe it's one piece of a overall planning package, planning and demonstrations proposals. It's a really big opportunity. If you're a very small community, maybe don't think you can handle the grant process on your own. Maybe you go to your MPO, maybe you go to a couple of communities and bundle together. There's different ways to do that. So really want to emphasize or encourage you to keep this in your mind for the next funding call and other funding opportunities. But SS Fray is, I know, one on our minds. Great. And then with that, we just have 2 minutes left. I'm going to ask you each rapid fire. Bill, I'll ask you to go first. Asher, the one thing, just maybe 30 seconds each. What's the one thing you really hope, one concept you hope folks take away from today's session? Bill.
Yeah, I think the number one piece is we want to make sure people are aware of this so they don't have to recreate the wheel. So often government agencies are the ones trying to build out these data sets, and then the commercial side is taking advantage of that. We're building it out for commercial entities, and we want to make sure everybody is aware that it's there, so that you guys can have access. So just really want to help. I mean, I've spoken with many people, especially in GIS, and nobody wants to do the digitization piece. We all want to we want to do the more advanced, innovative sort of planning and understanding spatial analysis. And so, really want to help you just get started and to be able to support any of your upcoming initiatives.
Thanks, Bill. And Asher, final thoughts.
Yeah, start early. That's like really my big thing is start early if you think it's something that you'd be interested in, your agency would really benefit from. Go ahead and start researching now. What worked for Rhode Island may not work for you. Everywhere's different. And also see what data you have. Connect with your agency partners, see what kind of data they need. We don't need we didn't need building data because we checked, and so figure out what is needed at your agency.
Perfect. Great closing thoughts. Thank you both so much, Bill and Asher. You've been so generous with your time. Really love hearing about the Rhode Island example, and thank you for leading on that. Bill, thank you for your support of Vision Zero and the work you're doing. Thanks to everybody. This was a great session. We have a lot of questions that we will follow up with individually. We'll also send an email out probably next week with the recording, so you can share this with others and yeah, listen again more closely. Or even more closely. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks for being
Thank you.
here. Bye, all.